To Wednesday Live. Today, we're going to be talking about how the subconscious mind impacts your life every day. And this is important because once we realize how the subconscious mind impacts our life every day, once we develop that awareness, it empowers us to make better choices. So before we dive in, I want to say that towards the end, I'll make some time available to answer questions. If you're in the Facebook group, Optimize to Thrive, and you have questions, just drop those in the comments below the video, and I will get to those. I'll also share ways that you can work with me if that is something that interests you at that time. So the subconscious mind. It's obviously something that you know that I am passionate about, right? It is something that guides us in everything that we do. And when I initially became a hypnotist, when I initially began to work with the mind, it was specifically to work with people around how the mind impacts our health, our well-being, and more specifically, chronic pain. That was where I was focusing my attention in the beginning. In learning about how the brain impacts the way we feel physically, I got a deeper understanding of areas of the brain that influence our perception, our mental and emotional well-being, and how those things act like a volume control on an amplifier. It can either really crank things up or it can turn things down. And there are a lot of things that come into play within the subconscious that do that. We have our conscious awareness and perception. If you followed me for any time, you've probably heard me talk about getting on autopilot. We get on autopilot, we're in our habits. We're not consciously focusing our attention intentionally on what we are doing in the present moment. What we are doing, where our attention is, and what it is that we're doing, how mindful we are or are not being, then it impacts our perception. So when we're running on autopilot and our conscious mind is we're busy in the weeds and we're problem solving in our mind while we're doing something else, our awareness isn't on our perception, and our subconscious mind can get away from us when we're doing that. I apologize, you hear my phone, I'm expecting a delivery, so I have to have the notifications on. Hopefully that doesn't happen during this call. So that's one piece. Then we have our expectations. What are we expecting to happen in a given moment? What are we anticipating? What are our, and this is where we're going to go with this, what are our thoughts, feelings, beliefs around that anticipation? That anticipation is either going to be gasoline on a fire of something that we don't want, or it's going to be a calming, neutralizing presence. Then we have memories. Memories definitely impact our perception, but if we are carrying around the emotional baggage of our memories, then that is going to come into play, in addition to what we're physically experiencing in our life. So we have to take all of that into consideration. I could go on for a few hours. I'm going to keep this simple, and this will probably get broken down into multiple short videos. I know everyone is busy. We all have short bandwidth these days. And so that is what I will do for you, is I'm going to keep this simple. We'll probably do multiple videos. So that being said, let's dive in here. I mentioned anticipation. I mentioned expectations, and I talked about memories. From the moment we are born, our brain processes our surroundings. It processes experiences. It processes experiences even when we're not aware it is processing the experience. Because as children, we can pick up emotionally what is going on around us, even when we're not directly involved in it, and it's happening around us. Our conscious mind processes 7 to 9 bits of information a second. The subconscious mind, depending on what source you look at, we're talking 20 million bits of information a second. Some people go so much as to say it's billions. My point is, look at the contrast. Your conscious mind is the equivalent of 7 books on a shelf. Your subconscious mind is the equivalent of the Library of Congress, right? It's processing a lot of information. So that means that wherever your conscious focus is, your mind is still taking in everything around you, visually, auditorily, temperature. We're processing all of that information. I think we could all probably agree that we have been in a situation, maybe we've been at an event, we've been in a store, we're busy doing what we're doing, and then all of a sudden our mind goes, wait a minute, something changed. The voices in the room suddenly got louder. Maybe off in the distance there's an aggressive voice, maybe there's a child crying. Something happens that snaps us out of our reverie. And yes, I'm using the word reverie intentionally, because we go into these focused states of attention and we're not aware that we're actually putting ourselves into a hypnotic state. We're going into a heightened state of suggestibility. So if we're worrying, if we're in conversations with people who are fearful, I'm going to use the term conspiracy theory, that can go in any directions. We're not getting political here. But when we go down the rabbit hole of fear and contemplating and debating what's going on in the world, and we're in that state of focused attention, we're actually programming our brain negatively there. However, we're still perceiving other things. So as we go through life, as we have experiences, our brain makes note. It simply makes note, this thing happened and that's how it made me feel. This happened and it's how it made me feel. Made me feel good, made me feel sad, made me feel excited. I really, really like this. I didn't like that at all. And it lays down these patterns. And then we get to a point where we're starting to understand. And you know, we're asking questions, and we develop our analytical mind around the age 7 or 8. So we start trying to put the pieces together, and we're putting meanings on these things. This becomes our like next level of perceptions. And we tie these perceptions, okay, back to this information that we filtered. We've stored these emotions, we've stored these experiences, and we're trying to put meaning on it beyond, is it good or bad? And the things that we hear people say around us, whether it's teachers, parents, ministers, kids on the school bus, kids on the playground, all the way up until who we are now, we absorb what people say and we put meaning on these events. Now, when something happens repeatedly enough, even if we put the wrong meaning on it, if it happens repeatedly enough, it becomes a belief. It becomes reinforced. It becomes a belief. And we can have beliefs that are so far down, we long since forgot about them because they don't impact us, right? They're not currently impacting us. However, when we make a decision, if we're given a set of choices, when we make a decision, our subconscious mind makes the decision around 7 seconds before the conscious mind. That data came out of the Max Planck Institute. Now, a couple of years, it's been more than a couple of years ago, in 2020, I did a workshop and I was looking to see if that study had ever been reproduced, because all good research is reproducible. And I don't remember the name of the team, but it was a group in Australia. They repeated the experiment and their data showed 11 seconds. So when we get to choose between A and B, our subconscious mind makes the decision 7 to 11 seconds before we consciously decide. Okay. Now, this is important because what that means is that our subconscious mind is going through the Rolodex of events in our life, and it is comparing what feels safe, what doesn't feel safe, what's going to give me an outcome that feels really, really good, what is going to create a set of circumstances that I can predict. What's going to create a set of circumstances that I can predict? Because predictability means familiarity. And even when it's something that doesn't serve us, to the brain, familiarity means it is not having to work and extend itself to survive. So, for example, someone had asked a question recently that I replied to about money. And they were talking about how they had reached this level of success. They got a huge raise in their job. It was more money than they had ever made. It was very different than the financial, stressful home that they grew up in. I'm going to go so far as to say poverty, because that was the word that they used. But they grew up in a household where it was always a fight to have enough money. They were always struggling to have enough money. And now here she is, she's making over 6 figures. She's doing so well. And like all of a sudden, she's spending money. So even though she's making more money, she still doesn't have any more money, because now the money is going out as fast as it's coming in. I have seen this with clients who make high multi-6 figures. I have seen this with clients who make over 7 figures. It's not that common once people get to that level, but it still occurs. And what's happening here, and I went through a whole process of explaining, to this person. I said, this is going to sound a little bizarre, but reading what you've written, this is what's coming up for me. And that is that as a child, your brain became very accustomed to being in this place of, always needing to get more money, always needing to be resourceful to make something happen. And now that you have all this money, what feels familiar is to be able to respond to not having enough money. Your brain knows how to do that. It's familiar. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm not comfortable with all this money. I don't know what to do with all this money. You spend it. You spend it. The brain creates a circumstance where you can go back to a place of feeling familiar. So in a situation like that, one of the things that has to happen is we have to begin to retrain the brain to have comfort and familiarity around having plenty of money. Now, there can be a lot of beliefs even underneath that, right? It's not simply I grew up being broke, so it's like that's what feels comfortable to my brain. That's not the only thing that could be going on there. There could have been stories around, because we love our parents. I mean, most people, 99% of us, I hope, we love our parents. Hey, Leanne, we love our parents. We trust them. We want their approval more than anything. This is basic instinct, okay? So as a child, if you heard those parents say, we're always broke because of the man, right? All business owners are evil. They don't pay enough. They don't do this. They don't do that. If you're a business owner and you find that you're making more money, but now money is slipping through your fingers faster than it was coming in, I would put on the brakes and say, number one, do I need to invest in all the things I'm investing in? Like, are they truly required for what I'm doing? But to also pause and say, okay, what is it that doesn't feel good around having this wealth in my life? What doesn't feel good about having this money? Because there could be a perception. Again, remember, we take all this information in, our brain records it, it records emotions to it, and somewhere in there, I'm just giving an example, nothing is 100% in this work, but giving an example that the person that we looked up to and we loved the most and accepts us, right? And they have this opinion that being wealthy is bad, that someone who is a successful business owner is bad. Like, that's the message that we received. Well, we don't want to be bad in our parents' eyes, right? A lot of people call this self-sabotage, but what it really is it's a protective mechanism to maintain our place in a tribe of people that are important to us, our level of acceptance. Things come down to, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? What is the level of acceptance that I'm seeking? Because that acceptance is one way that we interpret that we're lovable enough, that we're worthy enough. So you get to look at the stories that are underneath the surface, because out of our perceptions and out of our beliefs, that is where our stories come from. And that's one piece of addressing the subconscious. This is one thing that people do when we're talking about traditional coaching, is we rewrite those stories. That's what we're taught to do in traditional coaching. However, if deep underneath the surface, your level of acceptance and self-worth is tied to what your parents perceive a good person to be, you could have a hidden belief, you could have a hidden subconscious block underneath the surface that people call the saboteur, the inner critic, the inner voice that's keeping us down, right? And it's not that at all. It is a belief that is perceived to be protecting us. It's keeping us accepted. And this is where deeper subconscious work comes into play around these things. Now, through these perceptions, through these beliefs, we develop our values. Okay, this is a whole other level of the subconscious. We play out our values subconsciously when our mind is processing our expectations, it's processing our emotions, it's processing our memories and the emotional baggage that we may or may not be dragging along behind us, right? Our values come out of that, and our subconscious mind is going to take everything that's happened. Think of baking a cake. It's going to take all the ingredients, right? And then our values is a key ingredient. In your top 3 to 5 subconscious values are going to drive your decisions. You just go over to Google and Google values and decision making. You're going to go down a rabbit hole like you would not believe. Now, if we have subconscious beliefs and patterns that are driving those values, hypnosis is a great way to release those. If we have a hidden mental block, if we have a hidden story, hypnosis is a beautiful way to release that. Because I want you to think of a car. You're restoring a car, right? The car needs a new paint job. Maybe it needs some tuning up in the engine. If the first thing that you do is put a beautiful paint job on this car, it can look wonderful on the inside, but it doesn't run efficiently. It's not running smooth. It needs that tweak, that fine tuning. When we're doing affirmations, when we're doing journaling, those things are like the paint on the car, right? And it makes it aesthetically pleasing. It makes us feel better, right? It looks good, but then there can still be that resistance underneath the surface that's going on. And this resistance that we can't quite get at are these subconscious values. It's the subconscious beliefs. It's the subconscious perceptions. And it's amazing because sometimes when we uncover that nugget, it can be just completely mind-blowing and surprising that, like, that was it. That was it. But when you have that awareness and that insight, that is when you can immediately, your brain suddenly goes into like, wait a minute, I'm having to rethink everything here. And it's in that moment of reinterpreting that we can put down a new, better belief. Yes, somebody's commenting here in the Facebook group, you have expensive tastes growing up. Like that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, but it is a reflection of our parents or our friends, what we call prosperity consciousness. The thing is to get into the idea that it's good to receive money, right? We don't have to define where that money comes from, that it's safe to have more than enough money. I wasn't exactly intentionally going to money today, but I told that story. And so that's kind of where this is leading. You know, in order to create wealth in our life, we have to take actions. We have to put ourselves in the position to receive that money, but we also have to believe that we're worthy of receiving that money, or that money's going to come in and it's going to leave right back out again. I've worked with a client who had a multi-7-figure business and was broke. You know, this was a few years ago before the investment to work with me is where it is now. They were struggling to come up with the funds to work with me then. And it's because of one, the prosperity consciousness, not ever having had wealth before. There was a very negative story tied to wealth, but there was also this need to fix and people please. So they were literally giving their money away, right? They were giving their money away to the neglect of their own needs. So there are a lot of things that can go on there. Your subconscious is going to compel you to make the decisions that you make. So we get to explore that when we want to have wealth, when we want to have success, if we want to have better relationships. And I want you to think of wealth and abundance not just as financial wealth, but a wealth of relationships, a wealth of a network. We get to evaluate those stories. We get to evaluate those perceptions. And there are many things that we can do to help ourselves. When the things that we're doing to help ourselves are not getting the job done, it's probably something deeper subconscious. It's an important belief. There's a value placed upon that belief in terms of keeping you safe, keeping you secure. So if any of you have questions, you can go ahead and begin to think about those and put those in the chat. I have a few things going on right now. Number one, I've opened up a couple of spots on my calendar for what I call a deep dive session. So if you're having a block and you're dealing with something, it's like, if there's something in my way, I don't know what it is. I don't have all of this other stuff that I'm carrying with me to deal with. I've opened up a couple of spots on the calendar. I will go back and put the link in the video description as soon as this is done on YouTube, LinkedIn, and here on Facebook. I'll get that link in there for you. The other thing is next week, we're having our kickoff call for the Aligned Business Mentorship. If you're starting a business, or if you have a business and you're still in the early stages and there's not a lot of consistency there, starting a business that feels good is actually really simple. But we start a business because we want to be successful. We want to create success. We want to grow that success, and we want to be able to create freedom in our lives. No one ever started a business so that you could become an employee in your own business, right? So what we're doing in the Aligned Business Mentorship is we're working on getting those clients, getting that content created, getting all the pieces in place to go, because you've got to have business strategy. You got to have a marketing strategy. You got to start out with a really good offer. You got to have sales, and you got to have client delivery. And all of that sounds really overwhelming, but you can actually bring the pieces together quite simply so that you can emotionally separate yourself from the business. And as you're navigating the world of being an entrepreneur, you can actually look at your numbers and let your numbers guide you if what you're doing is working, not whether or not you're good enough, which is something so many people run into. It's something I experience myself. When things aren't working, we tend to put it back on us. I must not be doing it right. I must not be doing it good enough. No. When we can look at the numbers in the business and we can see what we're doing, we know what levers to pull, business becomes easier. Business becomes like a machine. So I will put the link for the Aligned Business Mentorship also, because if you pay in full, you're going to get a bonus of one-on-one Voxer access to me. So we have group community, but if you pay in full, you get a one-on-one Voxer upgrade as a bonus. So anyway, I would love to know your comments, your thoughts, your questions around how the subconscious is really driving our decisions. Because when you're in business, you want to be able to be reflective and objective, especially in the decisions that you are making, so that you can grow a sustainable, profitable business. All right, I will catch you all next week.